I was loading emergency medical supplies into my snowmobile trailer when I saw her marching across my driveway like she owned the place, which technically she thought she did. The woman had that unmistakable Karen haircut, the one that defies physics and gravity, and her face was already twisted into an expression of righteous indignation before she even opened her mouth. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Pinewood Estates HOA board, and that trailer is in direct violation of our community guidelines." I wiped my hands on my jeans and turned to face her fully. "I'm Owen Quincy. I live here, and this trailer is for my work with mountain rescue." She pulled out a tablet from her oversized purse and started scrolling through what I assumed was the HOA rulebook. Section 12. Paragraph 4 states that no recreational vehicles, trailers, or equipment may be stored in plain view of the street. "Your trailer has been parked in your driveway for 3 weeks now." "It's not recreational," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm a wilderness EMT and certified search and rescue volunteer. That trailer carries medical equipment for backcountry emergencies. We're heading into peak season with the snowmobile trails opening up, and I need it ready to go at a moment's notice." Patricia's expression didn't change. She looked at the trailer like it was an eyesore, though I kept it clean and well-maintained. It was an enclosed trailer, white with reflective medical symbols on the sides, clearly marked as emergency equipment. "The rules don't make exceptions based on your hobbies, Mr. Quincy. You have 72 hours to move it to an approved storage facility or face a fine of $100 per day." "This isn't a hobby," I said, feeling my jaw tighten. "Last winter, I helped save 4 people who would have died in the backcountry. We're the only rapid response team for a 300-square-mile area around Mount Jefferson in Oregon." She tapped something on her tablet. "The violation notice has been logged. Good day, Mr. Quincy." I watched her walk back to her pristine white SUV, the kind that had never seen a dirt road in its life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Jake Morrison, my partner on the rescue team. "Owen, you still good for the training run tomorrow? Weather's supposed to be perfect." "Yeah, I'm good," I said, still staring at Patricia's retreating figure. "Just had a run-in with the HOA president. She's threatening to fine me for keeping the trailer in my driveway." Jake let out a low whistle. "That's the medical trailer, the one with all our rapid response gear." "The very same. She doesn't care what it's used for, says it's an eyesore. Can you fight it?" "I'm going to try. I've got 72 hours before they start hitting me with daily fines." After hanging up, I went inside and pulled out my HOA documents. I'd bought the house in Pinewood Estates 2 years ago, mainly because it was close to the trailheads and had a great location for quick response calls. The neighborhood was nice, nestled in the foothills outside of Bend, Oregon, with mountain views and easy access to wilderness areas. I'd read through the HOA rules when I bought the place, but nothing had jumped out as problematic at the time. Now, reading through Section 12 again, I could see the issue. The language was broad and vague, prohibiting recreational vehicles and equipment without defining what that meant. There was no clause for emergency vehicles or work equipment. I grabbed my laptop and started drafting an appeal letter, explaining the nature of my work and the importance of having the trailer readily accessible. The next morning, I was up at dawn for the training run. Jake met me at the trailhead near Mount Jefferson, along with Sarah Chen and Marcus Webb, 2 other members of our volunteer rescue team. The 4 of us made up the core rapid response unit for the area, backed up by another dozen volunteers who could be called in for larger operations. "So what's the deal with your HOA?" Sarah asked as we loaded gear onto the snowmobiles. She was the most experienced among us, with 15 years in wilderness medicine. They want me to move the trailer off my property. Won't make an exception even though it's for rescue work. Marcus shook his head. That's insane. How are you supposed to respond quickly if your equipment's locked up in a storage unit 20 minutes away? That's exactly what I told them. I secured a medical pack to my snowmobile. I'm filing an appeal, but I'm not optimistic. The HOA president looked like she'd rather eat glass than admit she might be wrong. We spent the morning running drills, practicing rapid deployment scenarios and refreshing our cold weather medical protocols. The snow was perfect, and the weather held clear. It was the kind of day that reminded me why I'd moved to Oregon in the first place, why I'd dedicated so much of my free time to rescue work. Out here, politics and petty rules didn't matter. What mattered was being ready when someone needed help. My phone rang just as we were packing up for lunch. The number was unfamiliar, but local. Mr. Quincy. This is Deputy Williams with the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office. We've received reports of 2 missing snowmobilers in the Mount Jefferson wilderness. Can your team respond? My heart rate kicked up immediately. Yes, we're actually at the trailhead right now. Send me the coordinates. Within minutes, we had the location. 2 riders had failed to return from a day trip, last seen heading toward a remote area known for avalanche risk. It was already past noon, and temperatures would start dropping fast once the sun began to set. We mobilized quickly, years of training kicking in. Jake and I took the lead snowmobiles, pulling the trailer behind mine. Sarah and Marcus followed with additional equipment. The coordinates put the missing riders about 12 miles into the backcountry, in an area with limited cell coverage and no road access. The ride in was tense. We followed the trail markers, keeping our speed up but watching for signs of the missing riders or their tracks. The snow conditions were good, but that also meant avalanche risk was elevated. We passed 2 other groups of snowmobilers who reported seeing nothing unusual. 7 miles in, we found the first sign. Debris at the bottom of a steep slope, fresh snow that had clearly slid recently. Jake and I stopped, and Sarah pulled up beside us with the avalanche probes and transceivers. This happened within the last few hours, she said, examining the slide path. They could be under there. We deployed the transceivers and started a systematic search pattern. Marcus radioed our position back to the sheriff's office while the rest of us worked the grid. The trailer proved invaluable, giving us access to all our specialized equipment without having to make multiple trips or carry everything on our backs. 20 minutes into the search, Jake's transceiver picked up a signal. We converged on the location and started probing, then digging. 8 feet down, we hit something solid. It was a snowmobile, and beneath it, we found the first rider. He was unconscious but alive, his helmet having saved him from the worst of the impact. We worked fast. I cleared his airway and assessed his vitals while Sarah set up warming equipment from the trailer. His core temperature was dangerously low, and he had signs of a concussion, but he was breathing. Marcus helped me stabilize his neck while we carefully extricated him from the snow. The second rider was found 15 feet away, in better condition. She was conscious but hypothermic and had a badly broken leg. We splinted it and got both victims into warming blankets, then made the difficult decision about transport. The nearest road was 7 miles back the way we'd come, but there was no way to get an ambulance any closer. We'd have to transport them ourselves. This was exactly why I kept the trailer ready to go. We loaded both victims into the heated interior, where we'd set up a mobile treatment area specifically for situations like this. Sarah stayed in back with them, monitoring vitals and administering care while Jake, Marcus, and I made the careful journey back to the trailhead. By the time we reached the waiting ambulance, both victims were stable. The woman was even conscious and talking, though groggy from pain medication. The paramedics took over, and one of them clapped me on the shoulder. "Good work out there. That guy would have been dead in another hour." We packed up the equipment and headed back to town as the sun set behind the mountains. My phone had a dozen messages, but I was too exhausted to check them immediately. It had been an 8-hour operation, and every muscle in my body ached. When I finally pulled into my driveway well after dark, I saw the notice immediately. It was a bright yellow paper, laminated and attached to my garage door with heavy-duty tape. Violation notice was printed in bold red letters at the top. I tore it down and read it by the porch light. The HOA was citing me for the trailer, giving me 48 hours to remove it or face immediate fines. There was also a second notice, this one informing me that my appeal had been denied without review because it didn't meet the proper formatting requirements. I was too tired to be angry. I went inside, showered, and collapsed into bed. The next morning, I woke to find my truck had a bright orange sticker on the windshield. Property of Pinewood Estates HOA was printed across it, along with a notice that my vehicle and trailer were subject to seizure if not removed within 24 hours. That got my attention. I called the number on the notice and reached an automated system that eventually connected me to Patricia Henderson's voicemail. I left a measured message explaining what had happened the previous day, how we'd saved 2 lives, and requesting an emergency meeting with the HOA board. No one called back. I spent the day trying to find a storage solution. The nearest facility that could accommodate the trailer was in Redmond, a 40-minute drive without traffic. That would add at least an hour and a half to my response time for any emergency call, possibly longer in bad weather. It wasn't acceptable, but I was running out of options. That evening, I attended the regular HOA board meeting. The meetings were held in the community center, a bland building with beige walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. About 20 homeowners were scattered around the room, most of them there to complain about something or other. Patricia Henderson sat at a table at the front of the room, flanked by 2 other board members. I recognized one as Gerald Thompson, a retired accountant who lived 3 houses down from me. The other was Michelle Baker, who I'd met once at a neighborhood barbecue. When the public comment period opened, I stood up and approached the microphone set up in the center aisle. "Owen Quincy, 247 Pinewood Drive. I'm here to appeal the violation notice regarding my trailer." Patricia didn't look up from her papers. "Your appeal was denied, Mr. Quincy. You failed to submit it using the proper form." I wasn't aware there was a specific form. "The HOA documents don't mention one." "It's on the website," she said, her tone suggesting this was obvious. "In the members-only section, under Forms and Documents, subsection Appeals and Variances." "I'd like to submit a new appeal then, using the correct form." As I explained in my message, the trailer is essential emergency medical equipment. Yesterday, my team used it to save 2 lives in the Backcountry. We're a volunteer rapid response unit serving this entire area. A few people in the audience murmured their support. Gerald Thompson looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Michelle Baker was taking notes. Patricia finally looked up at me. "Mr. Quincy, we appreciate your volunteer work, but that doesn't exempt you from community standards. Many residents have commented that your trailer is an eyesore and negatively impacts property values. The rules exist for a reason." "What property values?" someone called from the back. "My house is worth the same as it was 2 years ago." Patricia's face tightened. Please hold comments until the public comment period. Mr. Quincy, you have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to remove the trailer. After that, the HOA will exercise its right to have it towed and will bill you for the cost plus accumulated fines. Where exactly is it supposed to go? That's not the HOA's concern. You could rent a storage unit, keep it at a friend's house, or sell it, but it cannot remain on your property in violation of community guidelines. I felt my temper rising but kept my voice steady. And if there's an emergency? If someone's dying in the mountains and I can't respond because my equipment is locked in a storage unit, then I suggest you prioritize your responsibilities as a homeowner in this community. Patricia gathered her papers. Next item on the agenda. I sat back down, frustrated and angry. The rest of the meeting was a blur of mundane business about landscaping contracts and snow removal services. When it ended, a few neighbors approached me to express their support, but no one was willing to challenge the board directly. As I was leaving, Michelle Baker caught up with me in the parking lot. Owen, wait, I wanted to apologize. Patricia pushes these things through without really giving the rest of us time to review them properly. Can you send me the details about your rescue work? I'd like to understand the situation better. Sure, I said, though I wasn't optimistic it would make a difference. But she's planning to tow the trailer tomorrow. That doesn't give us much time. Let me see what I can do. I drove home and spent the evening documenting everything I could about the rescue program. I wrote up descriptions of our operations, included statistics on response times and lives saved, and attached photos of the trailer and its equipment. I sent it all to Michelle with a copy to my lawyer, figuring I might need legal help before this was over. The next day was Friday. I took the morning off work from my regular job as a wilderness guide to deal with the HOA situation. At noon, I called the phone number for the property management company that handled enforcement for Pinewood Estates. A bored-sounding woman answered. Pinewood Management. This is Owen Quincy. I have a trailer that's been cited for violation. I need to know the exact timeline for enforcement. Hold on, I heard typing. Yeah, you're scheduled for tow at 5 p.m. today if the violation hasn't been corrected. Can I get an extension? I'm trying to work out a solution with the board. You'd need to submit a request through the board president. Do you want her number? I have it. She's not returning my calls. Then I can't help you. The tow truck is scheduled for 5. I hung up and immediately called Jake. I need a favor. Can I park the trailer at your place until this gets sorted out? Man, I would, but I'm in an apartment. No parking for something that size. I tried Sarah next. She lived on a farm outside of Sisters, about 30 miles away. Sure, you can park it here, she said, but that's going to kill your response time. I know, but it's better than having it impounded. I hooked up the trailer and made the drive to Sarah's place, a small ranch with horses and a couple of goats. She helped me find a spot near her barn where the trailer would be protected from the weather. This is insane, she said as we secured it. You're being punished for doing volunteer rescue work. Tell me about it. I checked my watch. It was already past 3. I need to get back before Patricia sends someone to verify it's gone. The drive back to Bend felt longer than it should have. I was exhausted, frustrated, and worried about what would happen the next time we got a call. That extra 30 miles each way could mean the difference between life and death for someone in the backcountry. When I got home, there was another notice on my door. This one informed me that I was being fined $200 for failure to comply in a timely manner, even though I'd technically met the deadline. Apparently, the HOA wanted the trailer gone by noon, not 5 p.m., and no one had bothered to tell me about the time change. I called my lawyer, David Ramirez, who specialized in property law. He listened to the whole story and sighed heavily. "Owen, you've got a case here, but it's going to be complicated. HOAs have broad authority to enforce their rules, and unless you can prove they're being discriminatory or acting in bad faith, a court is likely to side with them. Even though this directly impacts public safety, even then. You're not a government employee, and the trailer isn't technically an emergency vehicle in the legal sense. It's privately owned equipment used for volunteer work. So what are my options? You can sue the HOA, but that's expensive and time-consuming. Or you can try to get the rules changed from within, get yourself elected to the board, or rally enough homeowners to force a rule change." "There's a board election in 3 months," I said, remembering something from the meeting. "But that doesn't help me now." "No, it doesn't. My advice: document everything. Keep records of your rescue work, response times, everything. If this goes to court, we'll need to show a clear public interest that outweighs the HOA's aesthetic concerns." I thanked him and hung up, then spent the rest of the evening documenting everything as he'd suggested. I created a spreadsheet of every rescue call I'd responded to in the past 2 years, noting response times, outcomes, and the role the trailer had played in each operation. The weekend passed quietly. I kept waiting for another notice, another fine, another threat, but nothing came. Maybe Patricia was satisfied now that the trailer was gone. Monday morning, I was at my office, planning routes for the upcoming tourist season, when my phone rang. It was the sheriff's office again. "Mr. Quincy, we have a situation developing. 3 hikers are overdue in the Three Sisters Wilderness. They were supposed to check in yesterday afternoon. Can your team assist?" "Yes, but there's a complication." I explained about the trailer being at Sarah's place. "It's going to add at least 45 minutes to our mobilization time." There was a pause. "That's not ideal, but we don't have a choice. How soon can you be ready?" "Give me 2 hours." I called the team and explained the situation. We agreed to meet at Sarah's place rather than the trailhead, which would save a little time. I made the drive in record time, breaking probably a dozen traffic laws in the process. Sarah had the trailer ready to go when I arrived. Jake and Marcus pulled in right behind me. We hooked everything up and headed for the trailhead near the Three Sisters, a rugged area known for its dramatic volcanic landscape and unpredictable weather. The missing hikers had been attempting a loop trail, 43 miles through some of the most beautiful and dangerous terrain in Oregon. The sheriff's office had their planned itinerary, but that didn't mean much if they'd gotten lost or injured and wandered off course. We spent 6 hours searching before we found them. They'd gotten disoriented in a sudden snowstorm, lost the trail, and tried to take a shortcut across what they thought was a meadow. One of them had fallen through what turned out to be a snow bridge over a creek, getting soaked in the process. They'd managed to get a small fire going, but were all hypothermic and exhausted when we found them. We loaded them into the trailer and provided treatment during the transport out. All 3 would be fine, but another night in the mountains might have killed them. By the time we got back to Sarah's place and I made the drive home, it was after midnight. The operation had taken 14 hours instead of the usual 10 or 11. That delay could have been fatal in different circumstances. I pulled into my driveway to find a new notice on my door. This one was from the property management company, informing me that my HOA account was in arrears and that I owed $500 in fines and late fees. There was also a lien notice, saying that if I didn't pay within 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property. That was enough. Tuesday morning, I filed a lawsuit against the Pinewood Estates HOA, claiming their enforcement of the trailer rule was arbitrary and violated public interest. David warned me it was a long shot, but I was past caring about the odds. The lawsuit got Patricia's attention. She called me directly Wednesday afternoon, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mr. Quincy, I understand you've taken legal action against the HOA. I want you to know that we're always willing to work with homeowners to find reasonable solutions." "Really?" "Because 2 weeks ago you told me my only options were to move the trailer or pay fines. Well, circumstances change. The board has discussed your situation, and we're prepared to offer a compromise." "I'm listening." "We'll allow you to keep a trailer on your property, but it must be kept behind a privacy fence, out of view from the street. You'd need to construct the fence at your own expense, of course, and it would need to meet our design guidelines." I thought about it. A fence would be expensive, probably several $1,000s, but it would solve the immediate problem. And the current fines, we'd be willing to waive them if you drop the lawsuit and agree to the fence solution within 90 days. What about emergency access? I'd need a gate that I can get through quickly. As long as the gate meets our design standards, that should be fine. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. Send me the proposal in writing and I'll review it with my lawyer. Of course, we should have something to you by the end of the week. I hung up feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this could be resolved without a drawn-out legal battle after all. Thursday morning, I got another call from the sheriff's office. "Mr. Quincy, we need to talk about your response times." The delay on Monday's call was noted by some people higher up the chain. "There's concern about the reliability of your volunteer unit." My stomach dropped. The delay was because of my HOA situation. It's being resolved. The trailer will be back at my house within a few weeks. I understand, but in the meantime, we need to have contingency plans. We're looking at bringing in a backup team from Bend for primary response. That team is 45 minutes from most of our coverage area. We're 10 minutes. Even with the current situation, we're still faster. I hear you, but it's not my decision. Just wanted to give you a heads up. After that call, I sat in my truck for a long time, thinking. The HOA's actions weren't just affecting me anymore. They were impacting the entire rescue system for the region, potentially putting lives at risk. Friday afternoon, I received the written proposal from Patricia. It looked reasonable at first glance. I could build a fence, keep the trailer behind it, and all would be forgiven. But buried in the fine print was a clause requiring HOA approval for the fence design, with no timeline for that approval and no limit on how many times they could reject a proposal. I forwarded it to David. He called me back within an hour. "Owen, this is a trap. They can drag out the approval process indefinitely and keep fining you the whole time. Don't sign it." "So what do I do?" We keep fighting. "I've been doing some research, and I think we have a better case than I initially thought. Oregon has specific laws about HOAs interfering with emergency services. Your situation might fall under those protections." "Might. It's never been tested in court with a volunteer first responder, but I think it's worth pursuing." That weekend, I started talking to other homeowners in Pinewood Estates. I wanted to know if anyone else had problems with Patricia and the board, or if it was just me. What I found surprised me. My neighbor, Tom Richards, had been fined repeatedly for parking his work van in his driveway. He was a plumber, and the van had his company logo on it. The HOA claimed it was commercial advertising and violated community standards. Another neighbor, Linda Martinez, had been cited for putting up a small shed without prior approval, even though she'd submitted the paperwork 3 months before construction and never heard back. The HOA claimed they'd rejected it, but she'd never received any notice. There was a pattern. Patricia seemed to target anyone who didn't fit her vision of what the neighborhood should look like. Work vehicles, utility sheds, gardens in front yards instead of flowers, all had been cited and fined. By Sunday evening, I'd spoken with 11 homeowners who had similar stories. We agreed to attend the next board meeting together and demand changes. Monday morning, I woke to find my trailer was gone from Sarah's property. I got a frantic call from her around 7 a.m. "Owen, someone took your trailer. I went out to feed the horses and it was just gone." "Did you see anything? Hear anything?" "Nothing. It must have happened during the night. I called the sheriff's office and reported it stolen. Then I called David. They took it," I said. "The HOA somehow found where I was storing it and had it towed." "That's a legal seizure. We need to find out where it is and get it back immediately." I tried calling Patricia, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The property management company claimed they had no information about any towing. I spent the morning calling every towing company in the area, until I finally found one that admitted to impounding a trailer matching my description. "Yeah, we got a call from a property management company. They said it was abandoned on private property and needed to be removed." "That's my trailer. It wasn't abandoned. The property owner gave me permission to store it there. You'll need to take that up with whoever ordered the tow. We just do what we're told." "Where is it now?" "Our impound lot off Highway 97. You can pick it up anytime, but there's a $500 towing fee plus $50 a day storage." I drove straight there. The lot was a fenced area behind an auto body shop, filled with damaged cars and abandoned vehicles. My trailer sat near the back, looking out of place among the wreckage. The lot manager was sympathetic when I explained the situation. "Look, I can see this is a medical trailer. I'll waive the storage fees if you can get it out of here today, but I still need the towing fee. Company policy." I paid the $500, which hurt, and hooked up the trailer. Instead of taking it back to Sarah's place, I drove it straight home and parked it in my driveway, right where it had been before. If Patricia wanted a fight, I'd give her one. That evening there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 sheriff's deputies standing on my porch. "Owen Quincy, that's me. We need to ask you some questions about an incident involving stolen property." My heart sank. "Come in." The deputies explained that Patricia Henderson had filed a complaint claiming I'd stolen property from an HOA impound location. According to her, the trailer had been legally seized for unpaid fines, and I'd taken it without authorization. "That's not what happened," I said, and explained the whole situation from the beginning. The deputies took notes and asked a lot of questions. "You have documentation showing you paid the towing company?" one of them asked. I showed them the receipt. They photographed it and my registration for the trailer. "Mr. Quincy, this looks like a civil dispute, not a criminal matter. We'll file a report, but I don't think there's any basis for theft charges. You might want to get a restraining order or something to prevent the HOA from seizing your property again." After they left, I called David again. He was getting tired of hearing from me. "A restraining order is a good idea, actually. We can argue that the HOA is harassing you and interfering with your ability to perform emergency services. I'll file for a temporary restraining order first thing tomorrow." Tuesday was the regular HOA board meeting. I showed up early with my 11 neighbors. The community center was more crowded than usual, word having spread that something interesting was going to happen. Patricia looked annoyed when she saw us all filing in together. The meeting started with routine business, but when public comment opened, Tom Richards went first. "I want to talk about selective enforcement of HOA rules. Several of us have been targeted with fines and violations that seem designed to harass us rather than maintain community standards. One by one, we each told our stories. Linda talked about her shed. Another neighbor described being fined for having the wrong color of roses in her garden. A guy named Robert explained how he'd been cited for his basketball hoop, even though dozens of other homes in the neighborhood had them without issue. I went last. Patricia, you had my emergency medical trailer illegally towed from private property. You filed a false police report claiming I'd stolen my own equipment. You've interfered with my ability to respond to rescue calls, potentially putting lives at risk. And for what? Because you think a medical trailer is an eyesore. The room was dead silent. Patricia's face had gone red, but she kept her voice controlled. Mr. Quincy, the HOA acted within its rights to enforce community standards. If you felt the seizure was improper, you should have gone through proper channels rather than taking matters into your own hands. I paid the towing company and retrieved my property. That's perfectly legal. Gerald Thompson cleared his throat. Patricia, maybe we should discuss this in executive session. This is getting out of hand. I agree, Michelle Baker said. I move that we table this discussion and schedule a special meeting to review our enforcement policies. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but she was outvoted. The motion passed, and the meeting adjourned early. Outside, several homeowners I didn't know approached me to express support. One of them, an older man named Frank Williams, pulled me aside. I've been in this neighborhood for 12 years. Patricia's been board president for 5, and every year it gets worse. She runs this place like a dictatorship. We need to vote her out. There's an election in 2 months, I said. Who's running against her? No one yet. She's intimidated everyone into not running. People are afraid she'll target them with violations. I'll run, I said, surprising myself. I'll run against her. Frank grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. Let me talk to some people. We'll get you support. The next morning, I woke to find all 4 of my tires slashed. There was no note, no evidence of who'd done it, but the message was clear. I filed another police report, had my truck towed to a shop, and spent $200 on new tires. That afternoon, David called with good news. The judge granted the temporary restraining order. The HOA is prohibited from seizing your trailer or entering your property without your permission. The order is good for 30 days, and we'll have a hearing to make it permanent. Thank you. That's the first good news I've had in weeks. There's more. I found a legal precedent that might help us. A case in Colorado where an HOA tried to prevent a resident from keeping an emergency generator. The court ruled that the HOA's aesthetic concerns were outweighed by the public safety interest. It's not exactly the same situation, but it's close. Will it be enough? Maybe. We'll find out at the hearing. I spent the next few weeks in a strange state of limbo. I kept the trailer at my house, responded to several rescue calls with normal response times, and prepared for both the court hearing and the HOA election. Patricia didn't take my candidacy well. She started a whisper campaign, telling people I was irresponsible, that my rescue work was just a hobby, that I was putting the neighborhood at risk by storing dangerous medical equipment. None of it was true, but some people believed her. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. David and I arrived at the courthouse in Bend at 8 a.m., both of us carrying boxes of documentation. Patricia showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. The hearing took 3 hours. We presented our case, showing the importance of the trailer for rescue operations, the lives that had been saved, the response time data. The HOA's lawyer argued that rules were rules, that exceptions would undermine the entire system, that property values would suffer if everyone could ignore community standards. Judge Maria Castellano listened carefully to both sides, taking notes and asking pointed questions. When the arguments concluded, she sat back and thought for a moment. This is an interesting case. On one hand, HOAs do have broad authority to enforce their rules, and courts are generally reluctant to interfere with that authority. On the other hand, we have a clear public safety interest that extends beyond the boundaries of Pinewood Estates. She paused, flipping through her notes. "Mr. Quincy, how many rescue operations have you conducted in the past year?" 23, Your Honor. 17 of those required the equipment stored in my trailer. And how many of those operations involved residents of Pinewood Estates? None directly, but several involved people from the Greater Bend area. And my response times affect the entire Three Sisters region, which has thousands of residents and tens of thousands of visitors each year. Judge Castellano nodded. "Miss Henderson, does the HOA have any specific evidence that Mr. Quincy's trailer has negatively impacted property values?" Patricia stammered a bit. "Well, no specific evidence, but it's common sense that visible equipment like that would be undesirable. I see. And has anyone other than you complained about the trailer? Not formally, but I've heard comments." "Hearsay, then." The judge made a note. "Here's my ruling. I'm making the restraining order permanent with modifications. The HOA may not seize Mr. Quincy's trailer or interfere with his rescue operations. However, Mr. Quincy must take reasonable steps to minimize the visual impact of the trailer. I'm ordering both parties to work together to find a compromise solution within 60 days. If no agreement is reached, the court will impose one." It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough. The trailer could stay, Patricia couldn't touch it, and we'd have to negotiate some kind of screening solution. I could live with that. As we left the courthouse, Patricia grabbed my arm. "This isn't over. I'll make sure you never win that election." "Try it," I said, pulling my arm free. "I think the voters might have something to say about your leadership style." The next 6 weeks were intense. I campaigned hard, talking to every homeowner I could find, attending every neighborhood event, and spreading the word about what had happened. Frank Williams and the other neighbors helped, creating flyers and organizing a town hall meeting. Patricia fought back with everything she had. She sent out mass emails claiming I was trying to destroy the neighborhood, that my trailer was just the first step toward turning Pinewood Estates into an industrial zone. She even tried to call an emergency special assessment to raise HOA fees, hoping to turn residents against me. But people were tired of her tactics. The more she pushed, the more support I gained. The election was held on a Saturday in late March. Voting took place at the community center, with paper ballots cast throughout the day. I spent the morning at the polling place, talking to voters and making my case one last time. When the polls closed at 6 p.m., the counting began. About 50 homeowners gathered to watch. The atmosphere was tense, with Patricia's supporters on one side of the room and mine on the other. The final tally was announced at 7:30. I'd won by a margin of 73 votes to 41. It wasn't even close. Patricia's face went pale. She stood up, gathered her things, and walked out without a word. Some of her supporters followed, but most stayed to congratulate me and discuss the future of the neighborhood. My first act as board president was to propose changes to the HOA rules. We created specific exemptions for work vehicles and emergency equipment, established clear timelines for approval processes, and implemented an appeals system with actual due process. Everything passed unanimously with the other board members. I also launched an investigation into Patricia's handling of HOA finances. Frank, who had an accounting background, volunteered to audit the books. What he found was disturbing. Patricia had been awarding contracts to companies owned by her husband without competitive bidding. She'd also been pocketing some of the fine money, claiming it as administrative fees that were never properly documented. In total, she'd siphoned off nearly $30,000 over 5 years. We had no choice but to report it to the police. Detective Sarah Reeves with the Bend Police Department took our evidence and opened an investigation. 3 months later, Patricia Henderson was arrested and charged with embezzlement and fraud. The legal process took over a year, but eventually, Patricia pleaded guilty to reduced charges. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, ordered to pay full restitution, and banned from serving on any HOA board in Oregon. Her husband's companies were also blacklisted from working with any HOA in the county. As for me, I served out my term as board president, making changes that I hoped would prevent anyone else from abusing their power the way Patricia had. The trailer stayed in my driveway, eventually joined by a nice cedar fence that I built myself, with a wide gate for easy access. The rescue team continued our work, responding to calls throughout the Three Sisters region. Our response times improved, and we saved more lives. The sheriff's office even got us some grant funding for new equipment, which we stored in my garage alongside the trailer. I learned a lot from the whole experience. About standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. About the importance of community and the danger of letting small-minded people have unchecked power. And about the fact that sometimes the fight is worth it. 3 years later, I was having coffee with Jake and Sarah, talking about plans for the upcoming winter season. My phone rang with a call from the sheriff's office. Another rescue call, this time for a lost skier near Mount Bachelor. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "I'll meet you at the trailhead in 20 minutes, Jake laughed. "That's more like it. Remember when it used to take you 2 hours? "Don't remind me," I said. Those were dark days. I drove home, hooked up the trailer, and headed out. The mountains were waiting and someone needed help. That was what mattered. That was what had always mattered. The neighborhood looked peaceful as I drove through it, the houses well-maintained and the streets quiet. Under my leadership, and then under Frank's after I decided not to run for a second term, the HOA had become what it should have been all along. A community organization focused on maintaining the neighborhood while respecting residents' rights and freedoms. We still had rules, but they made sense now. They were enforced fairly and consistently, with proper appeals processes and reasonable accommodations for special circumstances. Property values had actually increased, not because of strict aesthetic controls, but because people wanted to live in a community that treated its residents with respect. As I pulled onto the highway and accelerated toward the mountains, I thought about how close I'd come to giving up, to just accepting Patricia's rules and finding a way to work around them. If I had, those 2 snowmobilers might have died. The 3 hikers might have frozen. The lost skier I was about to help might not make it. Sometimes the bureaucracy seems too big to fight. Sometimes the rules seem set in stone, but they're not. They're made by people, and they can be changed by people. You just have to be willing to stand up and fight for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when everyone tells you you're wasting your time. The mountains rose ahead of me, snow-covered peaks gleaming in the afternoon sun. Somewhere up there, someone was scared, cold, possibly hurt, but help was coming. Help would always come because I'd made sure of it. I pushed down on the accelerator and watched the speedometer climb. 20 minutes to the trailhead, then into the backcountry where the real work began. Where the politics and petty rules fell away, and all that mattered was the mission. Where I could do what I was meant to do, what I'd fought so hard to keep doing. The radio crackled with an update from the sheriff's office. The skier had been spotted by a helicopter, conscious but injured, about 2 miles from the nearest access point. Perfect. We could reach him. I smiled, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with every call. This was why I'd fought so hard. This was why it mattered. Not just for me, but for everyone who ventured into the wilderness. Everyone who counted on people like us to be ready when things went wrong. The trailer tracked smoothly behind my truck, loaded with equipment that had saved dozens of lives. Equipment that Patricia Henderson had tried to take away because it offended her sense of aesthetics. Equipment that now sat legally in my driveway, protected by court order and common sense, ready to roll at a moment's notice. As I turned onto the Forest Service road that led to the trailhead, I saw Jake and Sarah already waiting, their snowmobiles unloaded and ready. Marcus pulled in right behind me. We worked quickly, efficiently, years of practice making us a smooth team. Within 10 minutes, we were moving into the backcountry, following coordinates and terrain features toward the injured skier. The snow was perfect, the weather clear, the mission straightforward. This was what we did. This was who we were. And nobody, not Patricia Henderson, not the HOA, not any petty bureaucrat with a clipboard and an attitude, was ever going to stop us from doing it. That was the real victory, I realized as we carved through the snow, mountains rising around us in silent majesty. Not winning the election, not getting the court order, not even seeing Patricia arrested for her crimes. The real victory was this moment, right now, racing through the wilderness to help someone who needed us, using equipment that was right where it needed to be, when it needed to be there. Everything else was just paperwork.